Hello and welcome to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Years. In this series, I'll be following the events of an alternative timeline where Doctor Who wasn't cancelled in 1989. In this video, we'll be covering Season 27 of Doctor Who, so let's get started. Season 27 would have been the fourth season for Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, the third season for Sophie Aldred as Ace, the first season for Julius Wahala as Rain Cunningham, the 10th season to be produced by John Nathan Turner, and the first season to be script edited by Ben Aronovich. This would have been the final season to feature Sylvester McCoy, Sophie Aldred and John Nathan Turner. Season 27 had a rocky start to it. In late 1989, controller of BBC One Jonathan Powell had plans to finally put Doctor Who to rest. However, BBC Two controller Alan Yentop offered to take the show off his hands and move the show to BBC Two. After some arrangements, the show was officially moved, with Doctor Who now airing on BBC Two and on Saturdays once again. With the show now being overwatched by Yentop, J&T took the opportunity to speak to Yentop about leaving the show. Yentop agreed, providing that he did Season 27 and found a successor for the next season. J&T named his successor as Ian Fraser, who had worked as a production manager for the past few seasons. J&T also needed to find a new script editor, as Andrew Cartmel left at the end of Season 26 to go work on Casualty, as there was still a risk of the show being cancelled, and it would have left him with no work if it was cancelled. Taking on the role would have been Ben Aronovich, writer of Remembrance of the Daleks and Battlefield. Episode 2 would have saw Ace leaving, and Episode 3 would have introduced a new companion named Rain Cunningham, who would be played by Julius Wahala. Rain would be a cat burglar from a posh upper-class background. And finally, a new TARDIS interior would have debuted this season. The new interior would have been vastly different from anything prior. The walls were now very basic, and the console was now held up from the ceiling by the central column. And now, let's get to the episodes. The first episode would have been Earth Aid, written by Ben Aronovich. The story would have been set in space on board a ship named the Space Vessel Vancouver, of which Ace is its captain. The story would have been about the Vancouver on a mission to drop a supply of food known as grain to the planet Safan's home. However, the ship becomes under attack by a race known as the Metatraxi as they try to steal the grain. The Metatraxi would have been an unusual species as their metal complex stops them from attacking unarmed enemies. Therefore, the Metatraxi constantly trying to give people weapons so that they can kill them. Eventually, the Doctor and Ace, with the help from the crew, are able to push back the Metatraxi back to where they came from and deliver the grain safely to Safan's home. The second episode would have been Thin Ice, written by Mark Platt. This would have been the final story for Sophie Aldred as Ace. It also would have saw the return of the Ice Warriors, who were last seen in The Monster of Peladon. It would have been set in late 60s London and would have been about an Ice Warrior named Hesh, who was trying to resurrect the Ice Warrior warlord, Seja, by retrieving ancient Martian technology from the government, who had found it 40 years prior. During the story, the Doctor and Ace get accompanied with a gangster named Sam Cunningham and his partner Raina, who was a part of a secret service. Sometime during part 2, Raina would have revealed to Ace that she was pregnant with Sam's child, but that he didn't know of it yet. Then later on, when they've reclaimed the artifacts as well as Seja's old suit, Rain would have given birth to her child, and her birth speed was sped up when she accidentally put on Seja's helmet. Throughout the story, we would have saw the more manipulating side to the Doctor. All of this is a test for Ace, set up by the Doctor and the Time Lords, as the Doctor wants to enroll her in the Time Lord Academy. The cliffhanger to part 3 would have been Ace discovering the Doctor's plans and losing all trust in him and going rogue. The day is saved by Ace, who defeats the resurrected Seja in combat. This act impresses the Time Lords and gives her the option to join the Academy. The story ends with Ace being taken to Gallifrey by the Time Lords. The Doctor goes to his planet to say farewell to his friend, and the two leave on mediocre terms. third episode would have been Crime of the Century, written by Colin Brake. This would have been the introduction story for Julius Wahala as Rain Cunningham. The story would have been set 23 years after the events of Thin Ice. It would have been about a ship crash landing on Earth in Soviet Russia, and the Russians getting their hands on the technology. The Soviet leader, Vadim Senkin, wishes to use the technology to take over the world, and the Doctor must stop him. The story would have saw the Doctor recruiting Rain as his new companion at a garden party, and the two of them work together to stop Russia commencing World War III. Partway through the story, we would have discovered what makes Rain so special to the Doctor, as we learn she's the daughter of Sam Cunningham and Raina from the last story. And we also discovered that the Doctor is actually Rain's godfather. At the end of the story, the world is saved from Vadim, and the Doctor offers the crashed aliens a lift home. He then returns to Earth to say his goodbyes to Rain, but ends up inviting her on board the TARDIS to join him, but she accepts. And the story ends with the two of them boarding the TARDIS and going off on an adventure. The final episode would have been Alixion, written by Robin Mukherjee. This would have been the final story for Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor. The story would have been set on the planet Alixion. The planet is occupied by two races, the Alex and the Acrons, who have a history of war but now coexist with each other. The government of the planet have discovered the cure for immortality, thanks to their leader, who they called the Abbot. Using a form of time beetles, the Abbot has produced an elixir, which grants its drinker immortality. However, what the government doesn't know is the elixir is produced by feeding the minds of living Acrons to the beetles. Now the Abbot is immortal and wishes to become a god of the universe. He discovers the Doctor's TARDIS and wishes to harvest the power of it. Knowing the damage the Abbot would do to the universe, the Doctor keeps the secrets of the TARDIS to himself, but the Abbot is determined to get the secrets off him, and attempts everything in his power to get the secrets off the Doctor. Eventually, he discovers a way to gain the secrets without the Doctor even saying a word. If the time beetles absorb the Doctor's mind, the powers of the TARDIS can become an effect. So he hooks the Doctor up to a machine and lets the beetles feed on him. Meanwhile, Rain works with a group of Acrons who have discovered the truth about the elixir to help rescue the Doctor and stop the government. However, when they confront the government, they're just as surprised as they are, as they had no idea the elixir was being produced by the minds of living Acrons. They team up with Rain and the Acrons to stop the Abbot before anyone else dies. They find the Abbot and are able to overpower him and arrest him. He'll now spend the rest of eternity living in a prison cell deep below the planet, and will soon discover the curse of immortality. Rain meanwhile finds the Doctor still attached to the machine, and his mind being destroyed by the minute. Rain frees him from the torture, but it's too late. The Doctor is dying. He tells Rain to get him to the TARDIS before it's too late. On board the TARDIS, the Doctor is able to get the TARDIS into flight before collapsing to the ground. He tells Rain about regeneration and for her to be strong, as his successor might be unstable for a bit. And then he lies dead on the ground as the regeneration begins. Like in the style of the Fifth Doctor, the Doctor sees the faces of his companions, Mel, Ace and Rain, calling out to him. As the regeneration goes on more, the calls become louder and louder until they're practically shouting the Doctor's name. And then the real Rain calls out the Doctor's name in confusion and horror, and everything stops, and the story ends with the reveal of the 8th Doctor, who would be portrayed by Richard Griffiths. And that concludes season 27 of Doctor Who. A fairly average and mixed season overall, however it was seen as one of McCoy's weaker seasons. So join me next time for season 28 of Doctor Who. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.